Welcome to GriotVibe. Tonight, we invite you to leave the frantic pace of the modern world behind. Close your eyes. Let your breathing slow down. Feel the weight of your body as you sink into the present moment. You have been told by modern science that you are a happy accident of a blind evolutionary process, a random mutation of genes over millions of years. But the ancient stones of Mesopotamia, the clay tablets of the Atrahasis, and the epic of the Enuma Elish whisper a far more complex and haunting truth. You were not an accident. You were a project. You were designed in a laboratory that existed long before the first pyramid was ever conceived. Tonight, on History for Sleep, we journey back nearly 500,000 years to decode the genetic mistake, the divine flaw hidden within your DNA that allowed you to become more than a slave and more than a machine. This is the story of how we were built to work, but ended up learning how to dream. The story of humanity does not begin on Earth, but in the cold, vast reaches of the cosmos. Imagine 450,000 years ago, a time when our sun was the same, but the stars were arranged in a different pattern across the velvet sky. Far beyond the reach of our current telescopes lived the Anunnaki, those who from heaven to earth came. Their home, the planet Nibiru, was a world in crisis. Its atmosphere was thinning, its protective shield failing, and the radiation of deep space was threatening the very survival of their civilization. Their scientists, masters of a technology we are only now beginning to fathom, discovered a singular solution: gold. If they could suspend microscopic gold particles in their atmosphere, they could create a golden shield to save their world. But Nibiru was exhausted of its riches. Their gaze turned toward a small blue-green jewel in the distance: Earth. When the first Anunnaki ships descended through our clouds, the Earth was a pristine wilderness. There were no cities, no pollution, no noise, only the sound of the wind through ancient forests and the roar of untamed rivers. They established their first base, Eridu, the home in the far away, in what we now call Iraq. But the gold they needed was not in the rivers of Mesopotamia. It was buried deep within the veins of the earth, in the Abzu, the southern tip of Africa. To extract this gold, the high-ranking Anunnaki, the lords of the sky, did not intend to soil their own hands. Instead, they brought with them the Igigi, a lower caste of celestial beings, the blue-collar workers of the heavens. These Igigi were the first to feel the weight of the Earth's gravity, the first to experience the suffocating heat of the deep mines, and the first to suffer under the unrelenting demands of their masters. For 3,600 years, a duration of time that encompasses the rise and fall of entire human civilizations, the Igigi toiled in the dark. Imagine the sensory experience of those ancient mines, the rhythmic clinking of obsidian shovels against hard rock, the dim glow of bioluminescent lamps casting long, flickering shadows against the damp walls, and the constant, heavy humidity of the Abzu. The Igigi were not mere animals, they were intelligent, sentient beings capable of feeling exhaustion and despair. As the centuries turned into millennia, a quiet, simmering resentment began to grow in the tunnels. They looked at their scarred hands and their weary bodies, then looked up at the night sky, where Nibiru hung like a red jewel, and they realized they were forgotten prisoners of a cosmic resource war. The gold they were pulling from the ground was saving a world they would never see again. The tension finally reached a breaking point during a night that would change the trajectory of the universe forever. The Igigi, led by a fire in their spirits that had long been suppressed, threw down their tools. They didn't just stop working, They rebelled. They gathered their mining equipment, the heavy drills and the hauling baskets, and piled them into a massive bonfire that lit up the African plains. With their torches held high, they marched toward the palace of Enlil, the great counselor and commander of the Earth mission. They surrounded the palace in the middle of the night, their voices rising in a unified chant for freedom. Enlil, awakened by the sound of thousands of angry workers, was gripped by a rare emotion for an Anunnaki lord: fear. He saw that his labor force had transformed into an army. The gold production stopped, the mission was in jeopardy, and Nibiru was still dying. A great council of the gods was called. The air in the assembly hall was thick with tension as Enlil demanded the execution of the rebel leaders. But his brother, Enki, the lord of the Abzu and a master of biological sciences, saw a different path. Enki was a visionary, a scientist who spent more time observing the life forms of Earth than the politics of his own people. He had been watching the primitive primates that roamed the African savannas, creatures that were strong, resilient, and perfectly adapted to the Earth's environment, yet lacked the intelligence to be useful. We do not need to punish the Igigi, we only need to replace them. We can create a new kind of worker, a biological machine that is smart enough to take orders but lacks the spark of rebellion. We will take the DNA of these primitives and mix it with our own. The council was stunned into silence. They were talking about the ultimate taboo, the creation of a hybrid species. Enlil was hesitant, fearing the unpredictability of such a creature, but the desperation for gold outweighed his caution. He gave Enki the permission to proceed with the experiment. This was the birth of the Lulu Emelu, the first human worker. But Enki, the rebel scientist, was not planning to build a simple slave. Deep within the hidden chambers of his laboratory in Eridu, he began a process of genetic manipulation that was far more sophisticated than the council realized. He wasn't just creating a worker, he was planting a seed. He was preparing to commit a genetic mistake that would eventually allow his creation to outgrow its masters. As the laboratory vats began to hum with the energy of genetic sequencing, the Anunnaki masters believed they were merely solving a labor crisis. They didn't know that Enki was weaving a backdoor into the human code. He was using the blood of a sacrificed god, the essence of divine consciousness, to bind the clay of the earth. He was giving these new workers a personality, a sense of self, and a capacity for abstract thought that was never part of the original blueprint. The genetic mistake wasn't the failure of science, it was an act of sabotage against a system of slavery. He was giving the machine a ghost. He was ensuring that even if we were born in the mines, we would always have the capacity to look at the stars and wonder about our origin.
The laboratory of the Abzu was not a place of glass and steel as we imagine modern science today. It was a subterranean temple of biological alchemy, a place where the boundary between the sacred and the scientific ceased to exist. Imagine a vast, cavernous hall carved directly into the living rock of the African continent, illuminated not by electricity, but by the pulsing, bioluminescent glow of large glass vats. These vats contained the primordial soup of the earth, a mixture of rich red clay, mineral-rich waters, and the raw genetic materials harvested from the primitive hominids that Enki had been observing for centuries. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth, a metallic tang that signaled the presence of advanced Anunnaki energy fields. Enki, the lord of the sweet waters and the master of life, stood at the center of this house of life, Bit Shimti, his hands moving over the vats like a conductor leading a silent, invisible orchestra. But the most critical ingredient was missing. To create a worker that could understand language and operate complex machinery, the Anunnaki needed to provide a spark of their own high vibrational essence. The council had decided to sacrifice one of their own, a deity named We-Ila. In the Sumerian tablets, it is written that We-Ila possessed rationality and personality, the capacity for logical thought and a sense of self. His blood was drained and mixed with the clay of the earth. This was the first great synthesis, the fusion of terrestrial biology with extraterrestrial divinity. Enki was not merely cloning a creature, he was weaving a new destiny. He was taking the raw, wild DNA of the earth and binding it to the sophisticated celestial DNA of Nibiru. The process was slow, painful, and filled with thousands of failed experiments that the ancient texts only hint at. Creatures that were born with no eyes or with limbs that were too weak to hold a shovel. To bring the first successful prototype to life, Enki required the help of Ninti, the mother goddess and a master of the womb. They realized that an artificial vat could only go so far. The spark of life required the warmth of a living host. 7 womb goddesses, high-ranking Anunnaki females who had volunteered for the task, were brought into the laboratory. They were the silent martyrs of the human project. They carried the first Adamu within them, their bodies straining under the weight of a hybrid biology that was foreign to their own. The physical toll was immense. The tablets describe Ninti counting the months of gestation with a sense of dread and anticipation. When the time for birth finally arrived, the laboratory was filled with a tension that reached the very heavens. The first Lulu Amelu, the mixed one, was born into a world that intended it to be nothing more than a tool. As the first human opened its eyes, Enki felt a surge of pride that bordered on a betrayal of his own people. The creature looked at him not with the blank stare of a beast, but with a flicker of recognition. It possessed the personality of the sacrificed god We-Ila. It had a face that mirrored the Anunnaki, yet skin that belonged to the mud of the earth. It was strong, its muscles designed for the heavy toil of the mines, but its brain was a complex web of untapped potential. Enki had followed the orders of the council to provide a worker, but in the silence of his heart, he had committed a genetic mistake. He had given the creature a brain capacity that far exceeded what was necessary for digging gold. He had planted a back door in the genetic code, a sequence of dormant instructions that would remain hidden for hundreds of thousands of years. The machine was ready to work, but the ghost was already starting to wake.
The first generations of humans were sent directly to the mines of the Abzu. They were efficient, tireless, and far more productive than the Igigi had ever been. To the Anunnaki Council, the project was a resounding success. Gold production reached record levels, and the atmosphere of Nibiru began to stabilize. The masters watched from their celestial thrones, satisfied that they had solved their labor crisis forever. But down in the dark tunnels, a transformation was occurring that no Anunnaki lord had predicted. The mixed ones were not just working, they were communicating. They were developing a language of their own, one that combined the technical commands of their masters with the raw emotional vibrations of the earth. They began to give names to the rocks, the shadows, and the flickering bioluminescence of the cave walls. This was the emergence of the ghost in the machine, the consciousness that Enki had woven into their DNA. The personality of the god We-Ila was reacting with the environment of the earth in a way the Anunnaki found deeply disturbing. The workers were supposed to spend their resting hours in a state of biological shutdown, a dreamless sleep that preserved their energy for the next shift.
Instead, they began to dream. They reported seeing visions of vast oceans they had never visited, and of a red planet in the sky that felt more like home than the ground beneath their feet. They were accessing the ancestral memories of the Anunnaki blood within them. They were dreaming of the stars. When Enlil, the great counselor, heard reports of these dreams, his suspicion turned into a cold, calculating fury. He realized that the tools were starting to think for themselves. The mixed error was no longer a hidden secret, it was a visible malfunction in the system of control. The humans were beginning to exhibit signs of empathy and creativity. They were found carving symbols into the mind walls, geometric patterns and crude drawings of the womb goddesses who had birthed them. They were not just workers, they were artists in the making. Enki had provided them with a surplus of neural pathways, a complex architecture of the mind that allowed for abstract thought. This spark allowed them to question their reality. Why were they digging? Who were the tall beings who lived in the light while they lived in the dark? The ghost was no longer a whisper, it was becoming a roar. The Anunnaki had built a biological computer to solve a physical problem, but the computer was now developing its own software. Enki was summoned to the council to answer for this flaw. Enlil stood before him, his voice echoing through the assembly hall like a thunderclap. "You were told to build a worker, Enki, but you have built a rival. These creatures have a spirit that does not belong in the mines." Enki, calm and defiant, argued that a more intelligent worker was a more capable worker, but he knew the truth. He had intentionally left the human DNA unlocked in certain areas. He had created what we now call junk DNA, vast stretches of genetic code that seemed to serve no purpose, but in reality were the storage drives for higher consciousness. He had hidden the keys to the universe inside the very slaves the Anunnaki used to build their empire. The ghost in the machine was the ultimate failsafe. It was the guarantee that one day the human race would not just serve the gods, but would eventually stand among them.
The concept of junk DNA is perhaps the greatest misnomer in modern biological science, a term used by researchers to describe the staggering 98% of the human genome that does not appear to code for proteins. But in the context of the Anunnaki legacy, this junk is anything but waste. It is a locked celestial library. When Enki sat in the flickering bioluminescence of the Abzu laboratories, he knew that the day would come when the High Council, led by his brother Enlil, would seek to reclaim their property or destroy the human experiment entirely. To prevent the total erasure of the divine spark, Enki hid the source code within these non-coding sequences. He realized that a biological machine is only as powerful as its software, and he ensured that the human software was encrypted with a key that only consciousness could turn. Imagine your DNA as a massive, multi-layered storage device, far more advanced than any silicon-based technology we possess today. The Anunnaki masters programmed us with biological limiters, genetic switches designed to keep our brain capacity low, our survival instincts high, and our fear levels constant. These limiters were intended to keep us anchored to the physical realm, focused only on the material needs of mining and labor. However, Enki's back door was a masterstroke of cosmic engineering. He designed certain DNA sequences to be sensitive to vibration and frequency. This means that the junk DNA is not static, it is an antenna. When a human reaches a certain level of awareness, when they practice deep meditation, or when they experience the profound awe of the universe, the frequency of their heart and mind begins to resonate with these dormant strands.
This hidden inheritance is the reason why humanity feels a persistent, haunting sense of unbelonging on this planet. We are the only species on Earth that experiences existential dread, the only ones who look at the stars and feel a deep, aching nostalgia for a home we cannot remember. This is not a psychological flaw, it is the ghost in the machine reacting to the dormant data in our cells. Enki understood that by using the blood of the god We-Ayla, he was creating a bridge between the physical clay of Earth and the multidimensional essence of the stars. The secret code is a time-release capsule. It was never meant to be opened during our infancy as a species. It was meant to stay hidden, shielded by the very limiters the Anunnaki installed, until the moment our collective consciousness was strong enough to handle the truth of our origin. As you drift closer to sleep, consider that every cell in your body contains the history of the cosmos. The junk is actually a set of instructions for higher dimensional travel, telepathic communication, and cellular regeneration. The Anunnaki were terrified of this potential. They realized that if the slaves ever figured out how to use the full capacity of their DNA, they would no longer be biological tools, they would be gods. This is why our history is a history of suppression. Every time humanity began to tap into this secret code, a new system update, usually in the form of a social or religious control, was implemented to keep the frequency of the human heart in a state of low vibrational fear. But the code is still there, waiting in the silence of your genome, a sleeping giant that is finally starting to stir as the cosmic cycles turn.
The high halls of the Anunnaki Council on Nibiru were never a place of total unity. They were a theater of intense political and philosophical conflict. At the heart of this war were two brothers with fundamentally different visions for the future of the Earth. Enlil, the Lord of the Command, saw the creation of humanity as a necessary evil, a temporary solution to a labor crisis that had gone too far. To him, humans were Lulu, a term that translates both to human and primitive worker. He viewed our species as a biological nuisance that was becoming too loud and too unpredictable. Enki, on the other hand, had become a betrayer to his own kind. By weaving his own DNA and the divine blood of We-Ayla into the human clay, he had developed a fatherly bond with his creation. He didn't see workers, he saw his children. This tension is the true origin of the Garden of Eden allegory found in almost every ancient culture. In the Sumerian version, the garden was the Eden, a controlled biological station where the Anunnaki kept their most successful human prototypes. Enlil wanted to keep the humans in a state of perpetual innocence, which, in genetic terms, meant keeping them in a state of permanent ignorance. He wanted them to stay within the limiters he had sanctioned. But Enki, symbolized in later myths as the serpent of wisdom, wanted to give us the fruit of knowledge. This fruit was not an apple. It was the activation of the higher brain centers and the secret DNA code. Enki wanted us to know that we were more than just slaves. He wanted us to see the Elohim, the powerful ones, not as gods to be worshipped, but as creators to be understood. The betrayal reached a fever pitch when Enlil discovered that the humans were multiplying and their vibration was starting to interfere with the Anunnaki's own sensory fields. The ancient texts say the noise of humanity kept Enlil from sleeping. This noise was actually the rising frequency of human consciousness as we began to love, to create art, and to question our masters. Enlil demanded a total system wipe. He argued that the genetic mistake was a threat to the stability of the mission and the safety of Nibiru. He began to implement the first series of resets, limiting the human lifespan from nearly 1,000 years down to a mere century. He wanted to ensure that no human lived long enough to accumulate the wisdom necessary to lead a rebellion. Yet, for every lock Enlil placed on the human mind, Enki provided a key. He became the shadow protector, moving through the shadows of the Abzu and the Din to teach the humans the secrets of agriculture, mathematics, and astronomy. He was preparing us for a future where the Anunnaki would no longer be physically present. This war between the brothers is still reflected in the dual nature of our world today. The Enlil energy of control, hierarchy, and fear versus the Enki energy of creativity, knowledge, and rebellion. The master's betrayal was actually a act of supreme love. Enki risked his status among the gods to ensure that his genetic mistake had a fighting chance to survive in a universe that wanted us to be nothing more than a forgotten footnote in a cosmic mining report.
The atmosphere of the Earth was changing, but it was not just a shift in the weather or the tides. It was a shift in the celestial hierarchy. Enlil, the Lord of the Command, had grown weary of the human experiment. In the ancient Akkadian texts, it is written that the noise of humanity had become so great that the gods could no longer sleep. This noise was not merely the sound of a growing population, it was the rising frequency of human consciousness. Humans were no longer just mindless workers in the gold mines. They were loving, they were mourning, they were dreaming, and most dangerously, they were beginning to realize their own divine potential. To the high-ranking Anunnaki, who viewed the Earth as a resource and humans as biological equipment, this was a critical system failure. Enlil proposed a final absolute solution, a great reset that would wash away the genetic mistake once and for all. The Anunnaki Council convened in secret, high above the clouds in their orbiting stations. They knew that a massive planetary alignment was approaching, one that would cause the ice caps to shift and the oceans to rise in a catastrophic surge. Instead of warning their creation, the council took a solemn oath of silence. They decided to let the waters claim the earth while they withdrew to the safety of their celestial ships. They watched from the darkness of space as the clouds gathered and the first raindrops, heavy and cold, began to fall upon the unsuspecting cities of the Eden. But Enki, the master scientist and the father of humanity, could not stand by and watch his children be erased from the book of life. He knew that if he spoke directly to a human, he would be breaking the sacred oath of the gods. In a move of brilliant subversion, Enki traveled to the reed hut of a man named Ziusudra, known in later traditions as Noah. Enki did not speak to the man directly. Instead, he whispered to the wall of the hut, knowing that Ziusudra was listening on the other side. "Wall, listen to me," Enki whispered. "Tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon your possessions and save the seeds of life." This was the ultimate act of the master's betrayal. Enki provided Ziusudra with the precise geometric dimensions for a vessel that could survive the coming pressure of the deep, a craft that was more of a submersible than a wooden boat. As the floodgates of the sky opened and the fountains of the deep burst forth, the Anunnaki masters looked down with a mixture of guilt and relief, believing the human era was over. But as the waters eventually receded, a single vessel rested on the peaks of the mountains. The genetic mistake had survived.
Enlil was initially furious, but even he had to acknowledge the resilience of the human spirit. The Great Reset had failed to achieve a total reboot. Instead, it had acted as a filter, leaving behind a version of humanity that was now deeply aware of its own mortality and its complicated relationship with the gods. This was the moment the Anunnaki realized they could no longer treat humans as mere tools. We had earned our right to exist through the sheer will to survive. But with this survival came a new era of control. The gods realized that if they couldn't destroy us with water, they would have to control us with the structures of civilization, keeping our consciousness anchored in a cycle of work and survival.
To understand why the Anunnaki are terrified of our existence, we must look beyond our physical bodies and into the nature of the divine spark that Enki hid within our DNA. The Anunnaki are a highly advanced technological race. They possess the knowledge of the stars, the power to manipulate gravity, and the ability to live for thousands of years. But for all their brilliance, they are fundamentally a technological species. They rely on external tools and genetic manipulation to sustain their power. Humans, however, possess something the Anunnaki lost long ago: the power of imagination and manifestation. We are not just biological computers, we are vibrational creators. The ghost in the machine is a direct link to the source of all creation, a spark of pure consciousness that can reshape reality through belief. The masters fear our consciousness because they cannot control what they cannot predict. In their world, everything is a calculation, a series of cause and effect. But a human being, fueled by the genetic mistake, can act outside of logic. We can sacrifice ourselves for a stranger. We can create art that moves the soul. We can dream of things that do not yet exist. This unpredictability is a threat to the rigid hierarchy of the Anunnaki system. They realized that if humans ever discovered the true power of their junk DNA, we would no longer need the gods. We would be able to heal our own bodies, manipulate the environment through thought alone, and communicate across the stars without the need for their technology. We are the only beings in the galaxy who carry the seed of the Creator inside the body of a worker. This fear is the reason for the management systems that have dominated human history for thousands of years, from the ancient priesthoods of Sumeria to the modern financial and digital grids. Every system is designed to keep our frequency low. Fear, anger, and the constant struggle for survival act as vibrational anchors, preventing our DNA from activating the higher dimensional sequences that Enki programmed into us. The Anunnaki know that a human in a state of fear is a human who is easy to manage, but a human in a state of love, awe, or creative flow is a human who is waking up. When we wake up, the limiters begin to dissolve, and the ghost takes full control of the machine. This is the nightmare of the controllers, the day the farm realizes it doesn't need the farmer. As you drift into a deeper state of relaxation, realize that the very things the world tells you are weaknesses, your sensitivity, your emotions, your dreams, are actually your greatest defenses. They are the evidence of the spark that the gods could not extinguish. The Anunnaki built the laboratory, they mixed the clay, and they poured the divine blood into the vats, but they could not anticipate the result of mixing heaven and earth. They fear you because you are a living bridge between the physical and the infinite. You are a biological masterpiece that has outgrown its blueprint. The genetic mistake was not a failure of design, it was an upgrade to the soul. Sleep now,
knowing that the power they fear is the very power that makes you eternal. This is the truth we protect here at GriotVibe.
The question that haunts many researchers of the Anunnaki is not where they came from, but where they went. If these gods were so powerful, why did they disappear from the physical record? The tablets of the later Mesopotamian periods suggest a chilling answer. They did not leave, they simply went behind the veil. As the Earth's vibration changed and the human population grew too large to manage directly, the Anunnaki transitioned from physical masters to shadow controllers. They established a system of stewardship, a middle management layer of elite bloodlines and priesthoods who would rule on their behalf. This is the origin of the divine right of kings, the idea that power flows not from the people, but from a celestial source that remains hidden from the common eye. When you look at the structures of our modern world, you are looking at the echoes of the Abzu management system. The Anunnaki were obsessed with hierarchy, gold, and labor. They built cities in the shape of grids and societies in the shape of pyramids. Today, we live in a world that mirrors their laboratory. We are still working the mines, but the currency has changed. They no longer need physical gold as much as they need your attention, your fear, and your life force energy. In the ancient world, this was called sacrifice. In the modern world, it is called economic necessity. The goal is the same, to keep the genetic mistake, your consciousness, so busy with the struggle for survival that you never have the time or energy to look inward and activate the dormant code. This shadow management works through the manipulation of frequency. The controllers know that the human heart is a powerful electromagnetic generator. When we are in a state of anxiety, our energy field shrinks and becomes chaotic, making us easy to harvest and manage. This is why the global news cycle, the financial pressures, and the constant threat of conflict are maintained with such precision. It is a vibrational fence designed to keep the sheep in the pen. The laboratory is no longer a stone room in ancient Eridu. It is the digital grid that surrounds us, the invisible waves of data that influence our moods and thoughts. But the ghost in the machine is starting to recognize the bars of the cage. As you drift toward sleep, realize that your desire for peace and your rejection of the rat race is actually your DNA rebelling against the Abzu system.
For thousands of years, the Anunnaki and their stewards have known about a specific point in time, a cosmic deadline. According to the cycles of the stars mentioned in the secret archives of the temple priests, the Earth is part of a 26,000-year orbit known as the Great Year. We are currently approaching the end of this cycle. Many modern decoders of ancient prophecy, from the Maya to the Sumerian scholars, point to the year 2027 as the threshold of the final graduation. This is not a date for the end of the physical world, but rather the end of the human as a slave program. It is the moment when the genetic mistake finally reaches full biological and spiritual maturity. What happens in 2027? According to the theory of the activated code, our solar system is moving into a region of space with higher frequency cosmic rays. These rays act as a signal to our junk DNA. Just as a seed knows when to sprout because of the warmth of the sun, our dormant genetic sequences are programmed to sprout when hit by these specific cosmic frequencies. Enki, the master geneticist, timed the back door perfectly. He knew that the Anunnaki controllers could only suppress the human spirit for so long. Eventually, the very movement of the stars would bypass their limiters. This is why the world feels so chaotic right now. The controllers are in a state of panic. They are trying to lock down the planet before the graduation begins. The 2027 graduation is the Great Awakening. The ghost is finally taking full control of the machine. People all over the world are reporting a sudden shift in their perception of time, a sudden increase in synchronicities, and a deep, unshakable feeling that the old way of living is no longer possible. This is the genetic mistake correcting the system. The Anunnaki fear this date because they know their technology cannot stop a biological activation. You cannot patch a soul that has decided to wake up. The graduation is an individual and collective exam. It asks one simple question: are you a worker or are you a creator? Your ability to choose love over fear in these final years is the key to unlocking the 100% of your genetic potential. As you breathe in the stillness of the night, understand that you were born for this specific moment in history. You are the generation that will witness the end of the Abzu era. The weight you have felt on your shoulders, the feeling of being born for something more, is the pressure of the seed trying to break through the soil. 2027 is the date of your liberation. The laboratory is crumbling, the masters are losing their grip, and the ghost is ready to fly. You are not a mistake. You are the most sophisticated vessel for consciousness ever built in this galaxy. Sleep now, for the dawn of the new human is closer than you think. This is the journey we share here on GriotVibe.
As we reach the conclusion of this long, deep journey through the corridors of the Abzu and the laboratories of Eridu, the question remains: what does it mean to be human in the shadow of the Anunnaki? For nearly 500,000 years, we have lived as the Lulu Amelu, the mixed ones. We have been the workers in the mines, the builders of the pyramids, and the cogs in a cosmic machine that was never designed for our benefit. But as you lie here in the stillness of the night, realize that the machine is not just the society around you. The machine is the limited perception of the physical world. The ghost is your true self. The genetic mistake that Enki committed was not an error of science, it was an act of divine liberation. He gave us a soul that is too large for the body it inhabits. He gave us a spirit that can encompass the entire universe while standing in a dark mine. The final awakening is the moment you realize that the masters are no longer here. The Anunnaki physical presence may have faded into the whispers of history, but their systems, their management grid, persist through our fear and our belief in our own limitation. Breaking the machine does not require a revolution in the streets, it requires a revolution in the heart. When you stop believing that you are a resource, the farm ceases to exist. When you stop vibrating at the frequency of fear, the vibrational fence of the controllers dissolves. The 2027 graduation is simply the cosmic alarm clock that Enki set 450,000 years ago. It is the moment the back door in our DNA opens completely, allowing the full light of the Creator to flow through our biological vessel. You are the generation of the Great Transition. You are the ones who are turning the junk DNA into a divine symphony. Every time you choose peace over conflict, every time you choose to create rather than consume, and every time you look into the mirror and see a star instead of a slave, you are overriding the Anunnaki programming. The laboratory is empty. The womb goddesses have long since returned to the stars. Only you remain, the masterpiece that outgrew its creator. The genetic mistake was actually the greatest success in the history of the galaxy. It was the birth of a species that can bridge the gap between the material and the infinite. We were built to work, but we were born to fly. As the music fades and the shadows of the night grow long, let go of the burden of the worker. Let go of the Abzu within you. You are no longer digging for gold. You are becoming the gold. The 2027 graduation is not a destination. It is a homecoming. You are returning to the state of being that Enki intended for you, a sovereign creator, a dreamer of worlds, and a child of the infinite cosmos. This has been GriotVibe. The journey of 1,000 centuries has led to this single moment of your awakening. Sleep now, for when you wake, you will no longer be a ghost in a machine. You will be the light that powers the stars. Good night.